Hello, and welcome to Presenting, a podcast where we talk about various topics related to role-playing games, typically Paizo products such as Pathfinder and Starfinder, but also others. I'm John Godek, and with me today is Stephanie Lundeen. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
So Stephanie is I won't say an old friend of mine. I've known you for about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, about
somewhere
that.
along lines.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very excited to get this opportunity to bring you on our podcast here and introduce you to the world. So Stephanie is a freelance writer and editor for Paizo, having previously been a professional writer and editor for several other companies, as well as a visiting university lecturer, which I've heard quite a bit about. She has co-authored 2 Pathfinder second edition adventure paths, as well as done freelance work on several other second edition hardcovers and adventure path back matter sections. She's also has her own blog at ouramazingforeverfamily.com, where she details the journey of her not so typical family, and we'll talk about that. And for the past 3 years, she has played Kaholo, the rough and tumble Solarian, on our Intrepid Heroes Actual Play podcast here on the No Direction Network. And Stephanie, so the first question I have is, you're an editor, right? But you're a freelance editor for Paizo, right?
Well, my contract actually ended because Paizo is in the process of expanding their editing team and bringing on full-time people. And I wasn't interested in going full-time for them. I have, so many other.
So it ended just last week?
Yeah. Well, no, actually in June. Right, which was last week. Yes.
Okay.
No, at the beginning of June. But
well, tell us though what that job entailed as a freelance editor. I have talked to Simone before, who's a full-time technical editor.
Yes.
But as a freelance editor, it's a little bit different. And I knew that I'd seen that Leo had been soliciting more full-time positions. So I should have clicked that. I didn't realize that you were not still working for them. But kind of talk about this job that you did for Paizo, kind of what that entailed and how that differed from the editing you did for other companies.
Oh, my pleasure. Paizo has an absolutely amazing editing team. And so what I got to do was see the first drafts, do one of the first passes. Most Paizo products get 2 editorial passes before it goes to layout and then 2 passes after layout. And that meant that I was privy to products that won't actually be in print for months. So it was really fun to be getting the first look at this upcoming material. So I was, and I got to work on a bunch of different Starfinder, Pathfinder, Lost Omens, some of the organized play, whatever was kind of next in the queue. And it was so much fun. It was just so much fun. The team, Paizo's team,
the actual editing. How was that? I mean, what did that actually entail, I guess?
Oh, so it was kind of a holistic editing where I was looking at, and it's everything, basically. I mean, it was fine for me to catch typos and do kind of some proofreading stuff. And then also formatting, making sure that the styles were applied correctly and that the comments, sometimes the comments from the development pass were still in there. And so, make sure that, that they had been applied correctly and then that the comments were resolved.
Oh, wow.
It was kind of that technical side. But then there was also the concept side and then the language around the concepts. So kind of examining, well, all right, so here's a monster. How does that fit with how we've presented other monsters in this this type or from this region? And then what does the language look like that we're using? Are we applying standards around gender or the presentation of this kind of ecology and like, so it was just great because in a lot of the other jobs I've done, I've been very constrained about the kind of editing that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm either like, just proofing, or the client has a very set idea about how these concepts need to be put forth. And a lot of the technical writing or editing that I've done has been business focused. So it's just not as fun. Like with Paizo, of course, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And I think the ones that I enjoyed working on the most were the organized play, because it was the whole story. I got to see the whole plot. I got to think about the NPCs, the traps, the descriptions, like really have this just a lot of editorial investment and getting to shape the whole thing. I mean, let me add that most of the material I worked on was just in terrific shape. The freelancers or the in-house, right? Most of it was freelance, but had been through, the full Paizo development pass. So I was seeing very well-written and just exciting stuff. There were a few. And what's great about the way that the team has it set up is the things that, like maybe I didn't catch, that, oh, this isn't totally mesh with how we've presented this setting before. Is this a direction that we want to take it? Or is this, like if I didn't catch that, then somebody else did. But then, vice versa. Well, I know somebody else already gave this a pass, but I'm really not comfortable with how this is being presented. And the team has a great space set up to just really talk those ideas out, like copy is like, hey, what do we, what do we think about this? Or what have we done with this in the past? Or how does this, and then also for the grammatical things, right? Like, the reason that sentence doesn't sound right is because you're using relative pronoun when you should be using, blah, blah, blah. So it was just a wonderful team to get to bounce those ideas back, and then also see the and also just share that kind of knowledge about the language. And
Now, how did you get that opportunity in the first place? So you were an editor prior to that, and you have a PhD in English, right?
Yes.
So how did you get the opportunity? How did that go from you were doing the work before to now doing some work for Paizo?
Well, so I think it just had, so I've been a professional editor since 2013. I transitioned. So I have a PhD in English literature from Loyola University Chicago, specializing in medieval literature, which, also.
Oh, very cool. I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. Well, and, any medievalist who is also interested in fantasy also finds a way to, there's a lot of crossover. Tolkien was famously a medievalist and drew a lot of his inspiration from medieval works for Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. No, Middle Earth, I guess I should say. So I had started doing Paizo freelance several years ago. And I do still work as a professional editor. I have dropped down to just one company that I'm working for right now. But I think that I got recommended, when the editing team was in just kind of a straight spot, and they have contractors and they put out the call. And but I'm really proud of Paizo, really glad for the team that they're moving away from that model. It was a fabulous opportunity for me. And, there's always kind of that sadness that won't necessarily be an opportunity that I'll be able to pursue anytime soon. But I think that for the team, for consistency and quality for Paizo, and then just as a sign that Paizo is really making the right decisions, the right employment decisions, it's great that they're expanding the team and bringing on. I do have to say, on the requirements and the reason that there were contract opportunities to begin with is that Paizo has an just stupendous publishing schedule. Like they are so like the volume of editing was really really high, and that it has led to a lot of frustration on the part of the full-time editors. And it's really a big ask. And compared to the other editing that I had done, I was expected to move really quickly. And so I'm glad to see that will help to alleviate that kind of, and just make sure that Paizo is improving as a place to work. So,
yeah. Ron had mentioned to me that you did not want to go full time, and you said that as well. Is it family considerations, or is it other work?
It's other work. It's the one company that I have been with since 2015, I think officially, is a very small executive coaching company, and I just do not have the heart to leave them. They are really a terrific company, and I really enjoy the kind of they promote a very positive leadership model based on positive psychology, and they're just a great team. And the work ebbs and flows, but right now they've had more for me to do. And I knew from past experience, because I had tried this during shutdown, I was working full time and doing their stuff. And then, as you mentioned, the family considerations are huge. It's the summer, and it just is hard to give anything my full attention. But then the other two reasons is that I want time in order to work on this project that I've had in the hopper since 2018. I'm writing a biography of Utah's fourth governor, first Democrat, and the only Jewish immigrant to have been elected governor of Utah, one of only 6 Jewish people to be governors in the United States, period. And anyway, I won't distract myself by going off about it, but he's just remarkable. No one's written a biography. And I feel like right now is the time to be reminding people of the need to evaluate candidates based on their merits and based on their philosophies, and not based on their religious affiliation or their their country of birth, even, like it just the fact that this, Utah remains one of the most homogenous states religiously. And the fact that they were represented by a Jewish man who was an immigrant, had a German accent and everything. Anyway. And then kind of relatedly, I want time to volunteer for getting the vote out for this November. I feel like, so I lived in Argentina for a year back in the 90s, and I saw how carefully and devotedly people there were about their democracy, because they'd lost it more than once, right? They had lived through military juntas and their neighbors disappearing. And they were required, every Argentine who is eligible is required to vote. Like, you break the law if you do not cast your vote. And to compare that against, the US, where in a very tough, white knuckle kind of election, we break 50% of eligible voters voting. The last election here, special election, kind of an off time, blah, 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 barely broke 30%. That's the one that Ron ran for school board and lost. But the number of
only at 50%.
Yeah, 30, like it was a few
Yeah.
thousand people that even turned in their votes. So
Yeah.
yeah, like, I mean, he got clobbered, he lost by 20%, but it was actually a few hundred people.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
really want to have time. And if I'm working 40 hours a week, plus doing this and that, and then also trying to, yeah, so our kids are young enough that they really do need, um, and I also feel like I have these very few years before they're not going to need me.
Mhm.
It's very close. Um, they all think they're going on 18. They all talk a big game, but I'm really,
So speaking of your kids,
yeah.
you've started a blog talking about your family. Kind of what's the inspiration behind the blog? And I'll allow you to kind of describe your family and whatnot to describe why you started the blog, if you like.
Oh, well, thank you. And yeah, I should mention that as something else that I want to keep up. But the truth is that it's not a heavy lift, and it's not so. It's just such a pleasure that there's always time for the blog. So Ron and I adopted 3 kids. We were lucky enough to adopt 3 children at birth. Maya. Oh no, I shouldn't use those there. All right, strike that.
My
Um,
daughter's Maya.
okay, your
Let's get
daughter
that
is Maya.
straight. Yes.
So we use their middle names on the blog, and it was actually, so we have our oldest daughter that is in a more traditional adoptive situation where we did meet the birth mother. She wanted to interview us, and we send letters, but we were hoping for more interaction with her and with her family. And that has never materialized. And then the twins, on the other hand, their birth mom has become a very close friend and family member. And so we have a super open adoption with her. It's interracial, and and the blog, I think we started so we saw her very frequently, like pretty much weekly when we lived in Chicagoland. But then we moved out here and she was still in Chicago, and it was really difficult. It was a time of very deep transition, very difficult time for her, difficult for all of us emotionally as well, except Ron. He was like, I'm a Paizo. One morning he was all, where did we used to live before we came here to heaven? So yeah, the rest of us were like, I want to move back there. Right? So we started the blog as a way to kind of document the relationship. But since then, Danelle has moved out here, and we're back to seeing her a lot more frequently. It's not to out her totally, but she is also a role player. That's one of the ways that she managed to really bond with the family. And I mean, it's hard to be a Black nerd. It really is. And hopefully we can get her connected. Some more Black nerds out here, not just nerds. That part we got covered. But it was actually her idea to start the blog. Again, like I think I already said, to
Oh,
kind of document our unusual and promote the kind of openness. She's very much an adoption advocate, which is very difficult in her culture. It's really, she's taken a lot of heat for trusting, white parents to raise her kids. And then also it's emotionally very difficult for her. She works with birth mothers. She's part of an organization, one of the only nonprofits that supports birth mothers. And so she wanted to start this blog where we could both present our perspectives and kind of talk about the process and about how we've grown together. So the process is that we have a topic and we each write like our side of the topic. And we were better initially about posting regular updates. That's been hard to sustain, especially, like we've each gotten very busy or just burned out. Like, the shutdown was hard on everyone. So I feel like it's, uh, I mean, I would like to be posting more often on it and kind of getting, like increasing its viewership and impact. I think eventually we'd like to turn it into a book and kind of have
Mm-hmm.
something that really, I mean, there are no instruction manuals for how to have an open adoption and how to put together what we call a complex blended family. Um,
Right.
and I think we'd kind of like to make a contribution in that non-existent area. So
Yeah, I mean, when I see the interactions of the twins with you and Ron, and then with their birth mother, it's interesting to see, how they do. Like when they say it's time to go to bed or whatever, time to go to good night. Who disciplines them, right? She doesn't. She doesn't do that,
right.
right? So it's interesting to see them around, and I actually think it would be really interesting to get the kids' perspective as well
Oh,
on something
that's a
like
great
that.
idea, actually.
Because it's like for a long time when she wasn't out here, she was still in Chicago, the birth mom, right? You just had your traditional your adoptive family here doing things, and then what, 2 years ago, year and a half ago,
Yeah, just
when
over
she
a
came
year.
out,
Yeah.
and then she's over quite a bit now, right? That changes the dynamic some. So I'd
Yeah,
be curious. Um,
absolutely. That's a great idea because they are old enough now that they could really be
yeah.
contributing. Thank you.
Mhm.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And your oldest, what is her ethnicity? Do you know?
So we were told the birth mom was white, and she said that the father was African American. Um, but and but she's never had a lot of African features.
Right.
So as soon as it became, and my mom, who was a little obsessed with this, uh, send us one of the ancestry DNA kits as soon as
Hmm.
they allowed those to be available to, I think it's children 10 or older.
Hmm.
Um, and side note, we have been able to confirm that the twins are twins and the biological children of the mother. Anyway, and they are. It's so cute. They're like 96% African,
Yeah.
um, and mostly West African, which it just completely lines up with. But again, we didn't know very much about their birth father
Right.
genetically, but it's apparently pretty much all from the same well. Darnell will say, like, "I'm 1% British." Anyway, so with our oldest daughter, she is genetically 60% Celtic. And that's
Hmm.
changed every time we've looked, like initially it was all Irish, and since then it's been
Yeah.
Scottish and Cornish um but pretty much all of her European heritage is Celtic, and then 30% Native American.
Oh, wow.
And
I can see that, I guess.
yeah, and then between 6 and
Yeah.
8% African, and then the rest other.
Hmm.
So what I think is the deal, and this is not unusual for African Americans, I think that her birth father looked more African, but actually clearly had a lot of Native American
Right. Right.
DNA. Frustratingly for all of us, there's not a good way to figure out her tribal affiliation and that actually I've done some research into this because I remembered a conversation a very long time ago with a friend who was also pursuing adoption. And she was Cherokee. She is Cherokee. And so she explained that, there are these rules around whether children or that Native children need to go with Native parents. And so I got a little nervous, like, oh, wait, is this, do we need to report this to somebody or something? And it turns out, no, that affiliation thing is if the parents are enrolled in a tribe. And it's not racial, it's about belonging to a nation. So like if an Irish parent had a child with an American, then they could also then you would there, and then they'd anyway, like there
Right.
could be a connection with like they would have to file Irish citizenship or whatever. So
Right.
if a Cherokee who is a member of the Cherokee Nation has a child, then and they're enrolled and the child is enrolled as a Cherokee, then that's when the law takes effect. Like it doesn't actually have to do
Right.
with DNA.
Right.
So anyway, sorry for that side thing, but it's
No, that's interesting.
interesting.
I
Yeah,
wanted to know, so that's why
right.
I
No,
asked.
it's a really interesting area of, because I think one of our 19th century hangovers is that we still, especially white people, still think racially when it and that clouds like our understanding of things like sovereignty, right? Like when it's actually not
Mhm.
a racial issue. And to come full circle, this Cherokee friend, so they had been contacted and flown actually up here to adopt a Tlingit boy. He was Tlingit and one other tribe, but he was blonde. He was blonde and blue eyed. And so she was like, "Yeah, you wouldn't know." um, but because his parentage, or at least part of his parentage, were enrolled in the tribe, then yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. So getting back to more writing and stuff. So you've worked on 8 or more. I actually don't know how many total freelance projects for Paizo. How did you get you? How did you get your start freelancing for them in the writing part?
I I've really, it's been so long I don't remember, but I think I sent, once Ron encouraged me to just email and say, hey, I'd be interested in writing. And, um, I didn't have like a blog, but I had some examples of writing. And yeah, I really think that kind of the way that it definitely freelancing, it's hard to get started in, and it's hard to kind of know where to find your footing. Ron did a lot of writing for the Living Greyhawk setting, and so
Hmm.
he kind of knew his way around. He knew that you got to send emails. It really helps if you go to conventions, you meet people, you talk about the game, and then he had been. I am still trying to figure out social media. I'm not that great at understanding how, like, but I know like he posted on forums and stuff and met people that way. And I really honestly benefited from the fact that he's so outgoing and so willing to kind of help make introductions.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Ron, with your editing background, how much did you assist him with his projects? Were you an in-house editor for him, or did you review them, or did you say, you know what, I'm not going to have anything to do with that?
Well, the more prolific he got, the less involved I could, and the more I was working. Like I
Right.
mentioned during the shutdown, there was a point where I was working like full time with a part time gig, and maybe another part time gig, and um, so it would kind of ebb and flow. But especially back in the early days, I would I would edit everything that and a lot of his stuff is really clean. He doesn't need like a proofreader so much as well, hey, have you considered your have you have you considered how you're presenting this here, or what if we were to describe this room this way, what if this NPC actually was not um the abandoned orphan, or what if we went this direction with it instead. um So yeah, I really enjoyed collaborating with him on an idea level. Often, a lot of times, I would just read through what he had done and say, oh, you had a typo on page 4. But the more that so again, it was a really good training for me too. to read through what he was working on, and again, see how, occasionally say, well, let me research this idea here. Like, does that really fit with what's been? And he's very good with that. But very occasionally, it'd be like, well, let's see what exactly would a Kelwood tomb look like, So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would never think my wife would want to read through anything I wrote. I've written a lot, especially academic papers. I'm thinking, I don't even want to read and edit this. How could I subject somebody I care about to reading this stuff? But I think freelance writing is probably a little bit different. And you're a gamer too, right? So,
yeah.
So it was maybe a little bit more interesting for you.
Well, and the more that I wanted to get, and like, well, hey, you're doing all the writing, you're having all the fun, I want to do some writing, then it made even more sense for me to kind of have that, to take advantage of the like in-house opportunity, literally in-house.
So, now we've recorded over 100 episodes of Intrepid Heroes.
It's amazing.
We're probably up to close to 105. I don't know. I have to look at the exact number. We published, I think, 90, but we have a whole bunch more in the hopper. But that's all Starfinder, right? And you've been writing primarily Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
I haven't done any Starfinder, and I haven't done any of the rules books.
Mm-hmm. So are you interested in doing that? Can we see you? Oh. Maybe you'll be doing some of that in the future?
Absolutely. And you're reminding me that I need to send a couple emails. Hey.
Yes. Yeah, I do too. I'm still finishing up another project. I'm kind of waiting till I get everything done before I do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's the hardest thing about gig work and about kind of juggling various part-time opportunities is that it's either feast or famine, right? It's either everything is due this week, or this feels like free time. What do I do with that? Yeah. So,
and one question I kind of know a little bit about, but I wanted to ask you more about and kind of bring it up. And listeners to our Intrepid Heroes podcast will often hear you say, "Oh, I can't see this, I can't find this, or where is this thing?" Looking at you, even here on the video, most people wouldn't expect that you have a pretty severe visual impairment. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what that is and how it affects how you interact in your writing, in your game playing, in your editing, things like that?
Yeah, thanks. So I have a hereditary congenital disability. It's called achromatopsia, and it means that my retina didn't form completely. So I'm missing the cones, and I know that's very technical for anybody out there that knows something about the eye. And it means, what it means practically is that, and it manifests a little differently for everybody. I have a brother with the same condition, and even the way it shows up for him and the accommodations that he looks for are different than me. Than mine. So the three main issues for me are that I can't see any colors whatsoever. So I'm completely colorblind, which is very, very rare in women and pretty much derives only from retinal issues like this. I once got mansplained about how I couldn't really be colorblind because yes, it is true that most often it's connected to the Y chromosome, but I have an extreme photophobia, and this is what is kind of unusual for my particular manifestation, but I'm very, very sensitive to light and like sunlight, like it burns. It's really difficult for me to see outside on a sunny day. I have to wear sunglasses. I squint all the time, have a difficult time with fluorescent lights, but natural lighting is usually what's just overpowering. And then third, I have a hard time seeing details. So in addition, I've gained some nearsightedness thanks to the PhD. and computer screens generally. But prior, like when I was a kid, if a sign was far enough away, it just looked blank. And I really would be like, why do they just put up these big white squares, like, or black squares? And then when we get close enough, I could see that, oh, it says exit 2B, or, it says, drink this fabulous concoction, whatever it says. So, what that means is that, I use the and let me add that computers have come a long ways since the 90s, when I had to buy specific software just for a magnifier, or to kind of change the settings. But I use high contrast settings, which with every update, every browser, every program, something will go wonky. I use magnification. Which same thing, like it's great. Like on Roll20, like I can zoom in on part, but then I can't always zoom back out. Or I'll put something somewhere, and then when I are on the screen, but then if I move somewhere, it'll move, But a lot of times the biggest problems with computers is the contrast. If it's, let's say that, and there are accessibility standards around this that developers, I think, are more and more aware of, but there has to be a certain amount of contrast, or there is a best practice for the amount of contrast, like, black text on a red background is just really not optimal. And then sometimes it will translate correctly with the high contrast, and sometimes it won't. And so sometimes things are there and sometimes they're not. But yeah, when I was younger, I could kind of squint my way through regular print. Now I have to have large print for standard print materials, or like super high level magnifying readers, like the kind they do.
Yeah, I always see you with that little round magnifier. You have to put right on the table to put your eye up to see what's on the written character sheet. So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what is that called? But they were meant. It's a cartographer's lens. So it's meant to look at maps, for people that have regular vision but want to like really focus in on exactly this little corner of the map. But yeah, for me, that's how I can deal with regular print. Wow. With editing, so if I had tried to go straight into editing back in the 90s when I got my bachelor's degree, it would have been pretty much, it would have involved a lot of those cartographer lenses over, it would have been a very difficult kind of thing especially back in the earlier days of computers. And what is wonderful now is that I can use this adaptive assistive technology to, so I might, especially if I'm proofing, I'm likely looking at a page that's blown up to probably 24, 28 point font, or not actually, but the image is,
right.
The characters are really big so that I can make sure, that it's a comma, not a period, or that, so yeah, that's been a really key part. And then another thing that has been important for me is working remote. I really prefer to work remote because I can control the lighting. I can control a lot of the environmental things that are otherwise, like in a regular office, I would be the one sitting there in sunglasses trying to,
Yep. It's funny.
Let me say, back in the 90s, I was the one sitting there with the sunglasses or wearing a hat inside, trying to lean it up, basically on top of the computer. It was really uncomfortable. The shared computers where I couldn't, the administrator wouldn't let me do it in high contrast. Anyway, sorry.
No, I was going to say, with my allergies being so bad, even out here in Camino, so not my usual place, it's so bright out here that I generally have to wear sunglasses inside just to look outside. So hopefully this is going to clear up in the next couple of weeks, because it's really nice out and I want to look outside, but it's like, it burns my eyes. So.
Yeah,
So,
you understand my world.
yes. Yeah. If you like this all the time, man, that's gotta really stink.
And
This is
Danielle
just,
had her eyes dilated a couple weeks ago and came over and was doing the same thing. We had to find her some
yeah,
sunglasses. She wanted the lights turned off. And I was like, oh, that's how I should explain. And I wish I had remembered that, but that's how I
yeah,
should
yeah,
explain. It's
yeah.
like my eyes are permanently dilated. Like
Right,
that's
right.
and actually my pupils do, they expand in bright light, which is the problem, right? That's supposed to constrict. So yeah, it is like my eyes are permanently dilated and it's,
Wow.
yeah. Again, that's kind of unusual for my particular condition. If I could change one thing, I wouldn't give myself color vision. I would fix that because it's really, yeah, it's really pain.
So, Stephanie, what advice do you have for people interested in getting into editing or freelance writing?
I would say just first of all, well, they're two very different skills. They are
Right.
related, but they're different. For writing, I would say just do it. Like the one thing that I really gained, I mean, having decided to not pursue after a few years, deciding not to pursue full-time academic work, and then ending up like stepping away even from the adjuncting. What I really, really gained from my PhD was the ability to write. And of course, it was, very formal academic writing, but it meant that moving into other kinds of writing was really easy. And I really enjoy, for the most, well, I especially enjoy writing that I have a lot of autonomy over, like freelancing. So my first piece of advice would be get really good and really comfortable with writing. And I feel like blogging is really where it's at. Like that's really a great place where you can hone your skills and also showcase. And you have a lot of control. You write something embarrassing, you can always take it down. But then that also allows prospective employers to see what you're capable of and to see that you're regular, that you're disciplined, and I know with our blog, it's been a little disappointing to not have more readers, but I now kind of realize that's not necessarily the point. Like the point of, and like I mentioned, we are looking at hopefully turning this into a book at some point. And so having created that content and going through, some of the motions, but anyway, so my that would really, and I do happen to have the insider information that there have been a couple of freelancers who have really bobbled their, they finally get that crack, they get that topic, and then they've bobbled it, and it's been hard for them to. I think that it's not just that the Paizo developers are like, oh no, but that it feels so difficult as the freelancer. Like I know one personally, and I reached out to say like, hey, how can we get you, kind of going in this again? And they really weren't that interested because it had been such a painful experience. So as much as, and I totally remember this, my 20s, back in the 90s with the recession, it was so hard to get work. It was so hard to feel like you even got a foot in the door. Every job had 200 applicants. And so I remember very keenly that feeling of like, I don't know how to scale this wall, I've known since I was 10 that what I really wanted to be was a writer, and I never could quite figure, and so I went into education, I went into this and that. And I would not trade those experiences, like, especially like my time in Argentina, and working in English as a second language, like it was incredibly valuable. But also that little core of frustration that, that's not what I want to be doing. That's, and what I didn't. So I want to express that empathy for anybody that feels like, this is really what I want to be doing. How do I even get there? Well, start with yourself. Become an excellent writer. Then go to PaizoCon, get on the, or while you're doing it, go to PaizoCon, get on the forums, be prolific, be involved, get to know people, and then the opportunities will open up. But if you aren't where you need to be in terms of, the setting, you are comfortable writing, then that golden opportunity might turn out to be, what's a good simile here? I'm not good on my feet. Might turn out to be rotten to the core.
Yes.
So that would be my first, or I guess that's my whole. For the editing, that is a little like I did a little freelance editing, and then I put it up on LinkedIn, and I thought, oh, these jobs are going to come rolling in, and they never did. So I'm a little more, but I did have friends that would reach out, like I did a little bit, and then I was able to get my foot in the door at the coaching company kind of through that. And then from there to the other gigs. So I know there are programs where you can get a certificate in editing or posting. And I know that there are websites where you can that might be a little more targeted than LinkedIn. But again, I'd say make sure that you do a good job before you then kind of make your run at, because the gaming industry and especially tabletop gaming and role playing, it's very niche. There are a very few opportunities relative to the population at large. So I feel definitely very lucky, but also lucky that it hit at a time when I was where I needed to be in terms of my skill set. And that really, I think is key.
Cool. So what's next for Stephanie? I mean, you mentioned your blog and this potential book. Any other exciting things you'll be working on?
That's that's the core right now. Again, I will hopefully continue to be freelancing for Paizo and, land a few more of those. That'd be great to do more like Starfinder writing. And so, that's the excitement is around the fact that, with this, I think my biggest hope right now, my new frontier right now is this historical biography. That's a new direction for me. That's not, and it draws on, I think, a lot of the threads that like I mentioned, I actually started my career teaching English as a second language. So I connect back to that kind of understanding of what the immigrant experience is. And then, while I was working on my PhD, I did a lot of history classes and, kind of understand historical methods to an extent. And then I've really been working, taking my writing, not just in that dry academic vein, but towards a more creative. And so I'm excited to kind of pull that together. And then I got to figure out, where do you go from there? How do you get a publisher?
So will this be a historical fiction then?
No, it's not. My idea is not to do fiction, but to do more of a general interest. Like I don't want to do an academic biography. I want to do something more along the lines of Wallace Stegner, because he was primarily a novelist, but also wrote some really engaging history because he also was a novelist. So my hope is that it'll be, and I don't feel like I need to embellish this guy's life at all. It was so interesting, and he did so many really cool things that I don't need to, don't feel like I need to kind of novelize it. I think.
Well, I wish you luck on that and the follow-up screenplay that I'm sure will come. So
that would be amazing. Now that I would write. Absolutely.
All right.
But I really look forward. I'm really glad that we're continuing to do the Intrepid Heroes. That's always a high point. I really enjoy that.
Yes, tonight. We get a game tonight.
So I really, what's been, I think, very exciting about just kind of the direction that opportunities have gone for me the last few years, I think maybe more generally, is that, I can kind of have a lot of different things on my plate, like keep a lot of opportunities kind of hopping. And yeah, that's very invigorating for me. Is that invigorating? That sounded really dumb.
No. Well,
It,
Stephanie,
that's what I like.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun having a chance to chat with you in more detail than we ever do. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Hey, thank you. Really appreciate it.